In brightest day,
in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and isn't this how it always goes? I do the big video where I talked to Pele yesterday. Are DC Comics kind of abandoning the direct market and focusing their efforts primarily on other markets? And today we got the big marketing hire at DC Comics. We knew that they were going to bring in a general manager position, somewhat undefined. We're starting to learn what that's going to look like moving forward. And it is Daniel Cherry III, has extensive background in marketing. Most recently was doing Esports for Activision Blizzard. And here with me to talk about that is the Poobah of comics himself. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, this is a big moment for DC.
Certainly feels like they're paving a new direction as far as their vision for the company. But before we get into kind of all the details, I do want to say this is your first time visiting the channel. If you've been coming around but haven't subscribed, today is the day to subscribe to Thinking Critical YouTube. Hit the bell for notifications. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy this content. Give us a thumbs down if you don't. Either way, we'd love to hear your feedback in the comments. And if you like Perch, he does have his own YouTube channel. There will be a link in the video description. There will also be an opportunity to subscribe to his channel at the end of the video. I remember just a few months ago, people were bombarding me in my comments saying, you, sir, are a DC Comics shill. All you do is praise DC and all their moves. And now, because I think a lot of the news lately around DC has been pretty negative, so I've had negative opinions about that. Now I hate DC, and I guess it's going to keep going with this video. Because we do have to address the elephant in the room. If you go to Daniel Cherry III, the new senior vice president at DC Comics, also the general manager, and you look at his LinkedIn profile, you get a nice rainbow flag with a Black Lives Matter fist, in his banner. Feels like an odd message to be putting out there on your professional profile.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think this is going to be the image. I suspect that there's going to be a lot of people talking about this, a lot of speculation going on it. I feel two ways about it, and this is the stuff I know that just makes your viewers go nuts. I would never do that. But I think this banner, particularly for something like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not Twitter. LinkedIn is for all intents and purposes your resume, your CV that is up online. It is your professional profile. And generally, the rule of thumb is don't put anything in that banner that looks unprofessional, that is at all controversial, to the point that unless you work for the sports team, many people recommend you don't put sports logos and things in your profile unless you happen to be attached to that company. And that's a general rule of thumb. So obviously, I don't think it's smart for this to be up there. I wouldn't do that. That said, I think when you dig into the personality of this guy, it makes a little bit more sense. So please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's fine and everything else. I think it's you should treat your professional profile professionally, but there's probably a little bit more to that story that I suspect a lot of people are going to miss that we're going to get into now.
It just seems weird that when AT&T, Warner Media, DC Comics go and make this hire for this position, this isn't like a writer. This isn't the publisher. This isn't even an editor. This kind of hire shouldn't cost them sales or potentially cost them sales. But with the polarization in the country today, we see all the unrest across the nation. I literally just saw somebody assassinated by a man with that fist tattooed on his neck.
Yeah, it's absolutely offensive and terrible. I completely agree. And I think anybody out there who's doing this kind of stuff, they've got to distance themselves from this movement that I think to a lot of people represents, I mean, to people who are casually involved in it, it's about equality. I mean, Daniel Cherry has definitely been aligned with Colin Kaepernick and some of those efforts and everything else. And at a corporate level, this stuff seems like all just kind of a social cause. But then when you get videos of people getting shot shot and killed, you get things burning down and riots and everything else. I mean, it's at some point we've got to the nation has to grapple with these two things are linked. You can't say they're not linked anymore, and that's unfortunately that's a huge topic that we've got to address as a country.
I hate politics. I don't like really talking about politics. I avoid the news as much as I can due to politics. That's why I don't enjoy a lot of politics and comics, because everything is so polarized. There's no just presenting information to let people decide. For the most part, obviously, some people do it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a giant red flag for me as a consumer. Obviously, I have a YouTube channel. I'm invested in the comic book industry. I'm going to continue reading DC Comics, but I could see a lot of people. Not everyone's going to know this information, and probably less than 10% of readers are going to even know about this. But I could see a large portion of that 10% saying no.
Well, I mean, there's going to be a lot of videos that are made over this. Absolutely. I mean, this image and kind of his LinkedIn profile is going to get around for sure. And I'm not defending it. I think it's dumb to put this stuff in a banner. It sets you up, and it's like you said, you tie into that polarization, and it distracts from your message. I think there's a lot about this guy that is potentially interesting in terms of his personality, what he's going to bring. I don't know whether it will be good or bad, but the narrative is going to be all about this banner for a period of time, in much the same way, by the way, that when CB Spolsky came in, it was about this alter ego, this pen name that he used, and it detracted from what he was trying to accomplish. Now, the difference here is that, unlike that situation, there's a strong, I think, contingent of people who see no problem with this, will be fine with this. But again, I think if you're coming into a role, you're trying to expand profits, you shouldn't be leaning to one side or the other. You should be apolitical. You should be trying to sell to both camps, because you want to cast as wide a net as humanly possible. So anything that tilts you one direction or the other, arguably, is bad for business.
I agree. So yesterday, like I said, on the channel, I did bring Pele. We were talking about some of the signs and indicators that I personally think I've seen that tell me that DC is pivoting away from the direct market, and they're putting their priorities in other markets now. Is the direct market going away as far as DC Comics? No, but it's being deprioritized. And this, to me, this hiring further exemplifies that this man really doesn't have a history as far as publishing comic books, but he has a lot of experience as far as digital marketing and finding new marketing strategies for companies. And I think that he's in here to help them pivot towards this digital market, and also towards your bookstore sales, your graphic novel sales, stuff like that. Yeah,
your licensing and all of that. I think so. I'll say on the offset, for people who've been watching these videos from you and I, one of the things we've consistently complained about, and I think that it's true if you look at DC, is in many cases they make good moves, but their marketing, their messaging of those moves is typically terrible. You and I have mentioned this many times on the channel. They let other people, whether it's CBR or Bleeding Cool or others, kind of carry the message, the whole 5G debacle, all that kind of stuff. They're not in control of their own marketing. So I think, even we've talked about on this channel, that a good, smart thing for them to do would be to hire a really strong marketing hire. And they have done that, in the sense that this guy is a bare knuckles marketing hire. So that will, I think, help that piece significantly. But at the same time, and it's interesting. I think we'll see how it all plays out. But if I'm predicting here, I'm with you. DC is definitely going to lower the priority they've assigned to the direct market. I think all the signs are there, all the indicators of the hires, their moves, and everything else. However, DC has largely given more emphasis to the direct market and to comics than maybe the money that the license was bringing in should have done. So they're making a lot of money from other places. I think whether it's Daniel here, whether it's the business in general, you're going to see them strengthen their marketing, and you're going to see them follow the money. And I think that what that means as a side effect is that direct market and comic shops probably will get less attention, because the attention they were getting was largely out of whack with where the money was coming in for the company. They're going to basically, the direct market comics, I think, are going to reset back to any other license, any other kind of property that they're trying to put out. And you're going to see them put their bets and their money and their dollars and their best foot forward to the places where they see strong growth. And when you're bringing a guy who's driven, 9 figures out of Activision and Esports, and coming from a hockey background, a sports background, they're there to play to win. And what they're not going to do is kind of kowtow or spend a lot of time with a portion of the market that's, in their eyes, probably out of date, probably is making very little money. I mean, It's going to be a very interesting bag. They're not going to walk away from comics, but they're going to treat this like a strong product portfolio, strong marketing, and that's largely going to mean things that are not traditional comics.
You look at his background; he comes directly from Activision Blizzard, where he was doing esports marketing. And esports is really interesting. The way that they do their marketing, they actually don't really even have to spend money on it, because they realize that there are people out there, whether it be on blogs, Facebook pages, YouTube, that are out there getting the message out for them. And what they'll do is they will partner with them, do NDAs, things like that, bring them in, give them, select information, and let them go and do the marketing for them. So I think that would be interesting. And really, DC Comics, the comic industry, probably should be trying that route, because what they're doing marketing-wise is pitiful and not very successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot of pieces to unpack here. I think that DC and frankly Marvel and many of these companies could use somebody like this who's got an incredibly strong marketing background, who is, he's known as being a fighter. I think the phrase that comes up in some of the recommendations and some of the ways people talk about him is he is a warrior. He goes out and he attacks. And that is a little bit what comics needs. They need somebody who's going to go on the offensive and actually try and grow it and build it. But the side effect of that is they're going to grow it in many cases in areas outside of what we're used to as comic fans, because that's where the money is. Imagine this guy's going to come in. His goal is not to just kind of, let this brand float down the river, which is what a lot of people who come into comics do. Their goal is to maintain. His goal, and I think what AT&T and Warner Media and everybody is trying to push, is they want to grow. The only way to grow right now is going to be to grow beyond. Now again, just to be clear, I don't think I'm quite confident they're not going to shutter DC Comics. They're not going to kill it off. But the noise that company makes is going to be around their bigger bets. It's going to be around digital. It's going to be around licensing. It's going to be around partnerships with Waze and other things. I mean, that's it. Their goal is to make as much noise as possible about DC, the brand, not DC, the comics. DC, the comics is just one piece of that.
Are you saying that DC is moving towards the hated lifestyle brand?
No, not lifestyle. I mean, because this guy isn't a lifestyle marketer. He's a sports marketer. It will be. I think they're going to be about. They're going to be about putting that brand and that property as big as possible. I really would be shocked. Again, you read his background and you can see his work. Unlike a lot of people in comics, we've got a pretty extensive portfolio.
He's worked with Nike, he's worked with Jordan Brand, worked with ESPN.
Yeah, he's a serious contender. He's worked with
Sprite. A lot of big names.
Yeah, he and you see some of both the endorsements and the things that he's put out into the market. He's a tough guy. And I think that comics needs more tough guys. I think that's right. Again, this is going to make your audience cringe a little bit when I say this, but a lot of his DNA in terms of what he does and the products he's put to market and the focus on the money and again, you read the endorsements, he is driven to success. It's the same way a lot of people talk about Jim Shooter. Now, I'm not saying he's Jim Shooter or anything else, the resemblance probably ends there, but we have been talking about, and lots of people have been talking about, too many people in comics are complacent. They're willing to just be passive and let the world kind of pass them by. Maybe this guy will be too, but everything in his background indicates he is a fighter.
What's interesting, it sounds like Jim Lee, he's still going to be the chief creative officer. He's still going to have a big role at DC Comics, but he's kind of expanding outside of that. He's going to be in charge of like DC creative across mediums as far as character development, stuff like that. It feels like Daniel Cherry is actually going to be more hands-on into DC Comics itself and growing the brand.
Yep.
How are the creators going to handle this? We saw what happened when they fired some interns and a few big-name people, and they called it, Bloody Monday or whatever. Are they going to be able to handle someone with such a verbose personality running the ship and probably expecting better results?
No, I think a lot of people are going to struggle with this hire, and that's why it circles all the way back to his banner that he's using his profile and his social work, which we should also get to before we end. But he is going to be an aggressive guy. Again, this isn't me making a guess. You can look at his recommendations. You can look at how he's performed in other companies. unless you believe he's suddenly going to take a new job and turn into kind of a passive lump, he's going to come in pretty aggressive. That personality type typically is kind of oil and water with comic businesses, with publishers. One of the complaints a lot of people had about Didio was he was too aggressive and he was kind of a boisterous personality to push people. This is times 5 that. So I think definitely there's going to be some people who are not thrilled with this. I think you're going to see more angry articles coming out. You're going to see more comic shop owners claiming they're being left behind. And you're going to see
Are we going to see more leaks to Bleeding Cool trashing the future of DC?
I think you'll see for a few, but I think those will get shored up pretty quickly. Again, you look at his background and what he does, almost all of his career has been in marketing. You can go back more than 10 years in marketing and in kind of planning the message.
So he's not going to let anyone control the narrative.
This guy is not going to allow some leak within the company to use Rich Johnston to, explain what DC is. He's going to clamp that down and clamp it down hard. He has left some bodies in his background that you can see. You can see both positive and negative comments from people who worked with him in the past. He runs a tight ship. I think it's going to be a really fascinating 6 months. You are going to see some people shake out. You're going to see some much more aggressive, you're showing up to win or don't show up. And that part of that DNA is that could be a good thing. Now there's, as we've talked about, there's lots of other negatives too. So it's hard to tell which way this is going to go. But the fascinating part is you've got a very different personality coming into the mix now. And it's going to be one hell of a show. I could go either way. This is it's hard to tell.
We do see his banner on LinkedIn. Marvel, we call it SJW Marvel, when they went and they decided to go change all their characters to new, more diverse versions of their characters. Widely criticized in the end. He is going to have some creative input as far as the direction and who's getting what assignments. Do you think that's going to be a big push of his, is to bring in and infuse the company with more diversity, not only within the creators, within the editorial, but also within the characters as well?
I doubt it. And here's why. If you look at his past at Activision and you look at what he did for the New Jersey Devils and others, you see him very active during that time period. And he's still active. He's on several board of directors, or several boards. He's on, he gets involved in various projects, various social causes. He volunteers. He cites his interests being economic empowerment, civil rights, social action. He's very active in those things. But in his job, where he's been, he's working, you don't see this big, call for diversity or these kinds of things that we see in comics. You see a much more aggressive, focused attack on dealing with the brand they have. I think he's going to gauge his success of being wildly successful as being somebody who can take a Superman and a Batman and a Green Lantern and a Flash and make them omnipresent across all different types of marketings and brands. I don't think he's going to waste time saying, let's replace all the characters and bring in different people. That would slow him down from making progress. Now, maybe he does. Anything can happen. But again, if you look at what he did at Activision, look at what he did with the New Jersey Devils and some of the other companies he's worked for, he's much more, he seems to hone into the brand and push it. And then simultaneously, he's also involved in all these social causes and other things, but he doesn't seem to mix the two. And that's why his LinkedIn banner and kind of his profile and other things are interesting from the standpoint of it's definitely a part of his life. But I think a lot of people are going to see this and make the mistake of assuming he's going to come in and kind of champion a bunch of these kind of initiatives we've seen out of Marvel, whereas the rest of his background seems to indicate he's going to come in and fight a pretty bloody battle. The fascinating part for me is Marvel's always carried themselves as the big guys, and Cherry's approach is to say, no, we're the top of the mountain, and you gotta, he'll fight it out. And I don't think Marvel's dealt with somebody who is outside the industry coming in with some authority and willing to take them on head to head. I mean, everybody else is either kind of kowtowed to some extent or they play the game as all.
Are we going to see CV Cebulski toe the line?
I think it's going to be a fascinating. I mean, I'm fascinated to see.
He seems very passive.
Oh, he is. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I I'm fascinated to see what that fight looks like. And people in the comments I know are going to be like, oh, Perch saying everything is perfect and everything else. I'm not saying that at all. Lots of ways this could go terribly wrong, but it is going to be one hell of a show.
I agree with you, but like I said, I do think it sends a wrong initial message. Making a hiring like this probably shouldn't cost you sales. I imagine it will. There is going to be some outrage, whether he likes it or not, or whether Black Lives Matter supporters like it or not. That signal is now associated with a lot of violence and death right now. And that's, whether you like it or not, that's just kind of the environment that we're in with this very polarized political environment that we are in right now, heading towards the elections. Only going to get worse as we move towards November. So
for sure. Yeah, no,
it's a bold move, Cotton, right?
It's a bold move. I don't think that's smart to do. I wouldn't do it. And I think if, for anybody in their professional career, you got to put some balance. And by the way,
it's too bad he's overshadowing his other accomplishments that probably have a better indicator of what we can expect.
You're right. And it'll be interesting to see if any of this makes it to him, that he's got this banner here, which probably he's pretty insulated in that company. I doubt any of it will. But if any of it does, his attitude's going to be like, that's none of your business, screw off. And then he's going to just go back to punching for Batman. That's how he's going to address this. Now, what he can't control, and anybody who's thinking about this should be aware of, is we don't know if there's more shootings, we don't know what the news cycle is going to do over the next couple months, but don't take that risk. I mean, good Lord, don't have your banner of your professional profile tied to any political organization or social movement. It's just a dumb idea right now. There's too much in flight.
A lot of uncertainty. Perch, I do appreciate you coming to the channel, giving us perspective. Obviously, this kind of flows right into what we talked about yesterday with Pele. I think this is further indications that DC are pivoting away from the direct market, putting their emphasis on other things. And tomorrow you'll be back on the channel. We're going to cover some other DC Comics news, including Batman Day, the future of Grant Morrison, and potentially Scott Snyder.
Sounds great.
Also, if you enjoy Perch, right now there should be an icon on the channel. You select it, you can go to his channel and subscribe. If you haven't already, I highly encourage you.
Come yell at me there. Why not?